What up, everybody? It's the Iron Sun, and this discussion is called "Walk the Plank." So this discussion is about diminishing returns, and the concept was reintroduced to the manosphere by Rollo Tomasi. I'm going to review a couple of videos of men talking with women, and I'm going to see if I can find uh, the exact point where the diminishing returns. I'm going to see if I can find the exact point where the conversation was pointless from an intellectual standpoint and try to discuss some strategies and ideas that I have regarding any type of conversations that can be had with the opposite sex and the reasons why having conversations with the opposite sex can be volatile and how to navigate that, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, so yeah, let me show myself now. There you go. Haven't been on in a bit. So I'm gonna play a video. I don't want to do too much, probably just be on for about maybe 15, 20 minutes. But there is one particular video with this lady I was on with earlier, I think earlier in the year. Her name is Carmen Studer. And it was an interesting conversation, to say the least. But I'm trying to figure out when the conversation went bad. So I'm gonna pull up one of the videos. Hey everybody, I'm the Iron Sun, and I'm here with. All right, so I found the video. I did this video probably 9 to 10 months ago. It was done a long time ago. So I was corresponding, speaking with Carmen to do a possible live stream in the future. Point of this video is to kind of analyze it to see what went wrong with the conversation, because there was a point of contention towards the middle, probably the first third of the conversation, and then it kind of derailed. There was just this kind of underlying energy that just was kind of off. Like, I don't know if she was angry at me or the stuff I was saying, or just frustrated with something in her own life or what. But I kind of want to show, I guess, some of the things that can happen when you speak to people and you give your opinion just in the modern day, and how it's kind of become more volatile. Carmen Studer, my guest, and we're going to talk about the planned obsolescence of the sexes, and we're just going to have a general conversation about it. So, Carmen, I wanted to start out by saying thank you for coming on. This is like really cool. It's kind of like really cool that this is happening. It's kind of nuts how I was like watching your videos and listening, like, wow, awesome. And now I'm kind of making content as well. Like, I couldn't have imagined it. I think there were probably several content creators similar to you who said a lot of people, like, what's his name? Patriot Street Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, we need some other little guys to go make a channel. You know, their channel's not big and my channel. So our conversations weren't just going into gender and sex and stuff like that. It was going into, I was branching off into some aspects of politics. But then we did circle back around to gender and gender roles and, you know, the modern relationship dynamic. I'm going to highlight some of the stuff that went wrong, and I'm going to highlight where I think the diminishing returns happen. So there was a point in the conversations where we broke communication because she had like her whole console or her apparently her wireless modem like came out of the wall, like came out of the socket, so she had to reset it and stuff. So I'm going to skip a part of it.
Channel's not big at all.
Well, you can see
like,
here we're kind of getting along.
Go make channels.
We're not
just go
fighting
say what you
anything.
say what you need to say. Say anything. It's like okay, cool. So I said what I needed to say. He actually came to an event in the Dallas Metroplex area, and I went there to visit him, and I told him about my channel, and I met like a whole bunch of people. It was like the coolest thing ever. And two different sides. So
all right. So right here is about where I think she clicked out, but her modem, her wireless modem, came out of the socket or something like that. So I'm gonna skip.
So I'm a millennial man, and she
to where she returns. I'm gonna skip to where she returns and the connection gets better or something.
No.
Okay, perfect.
There are technical issues.
I am so sorry. I literally, when I sometimes have a mentor or have somebody that I wanted to swim around in mother energy still. So I have always mentored, and I loved babysitting when I was younger, and really love younger people. I just have a fun time with them. But I also have, you know, a woman that's older than me that's mentoring me, and kind of like my religious advisor, so to speak. And I have several really good friends that I, you know, communicate with of all ages. I ask my daughter for advice all the time, and she's 24.
That's really cool. When the older individuals can actually ask and seek wisdom from people of all ages, that's really awesome. Like, I have a younger brother. I get a lot of wisdom from him, even though he looks up to me in a lot of ways, but like, I actually look to him for a lot of different things. He's a little bit, he's very logical, similar to me, but my logic, the way I think, sometimes I wrap it in chaos, but then he's a little bit more grounded in that, but in a different way. So there's a lot of things that I don't recognize until I ask and try to pull certain ideas from him, and then I get it. But then you have a lot of for some people, they, you know, kind of like what a lot of our politicians are doing right now, or a lot of administrators, people in high positions are doing right now. They kind of use that ethos as a way to make themselves seem more superior, and so they can't be questioned. They can't ask for answers to other people.
Right.
And as you know, it kind of creates a lot of issues.
Yeah. Yep. It's really cool. Like I'm just trying to think, like, there's so many things that I have to say because my mind went a million different directions, but probably the main one that really popped out to me when you were talking about that is people will always say, you know, the younger the people this, and they tend to complain every time. And I look at them and I say, do you know, I have never gone to a car dealership and said, can you get me an older car, please, older than the one I'm driving? Why don't I want that car? And the reason I don't want the older car, now, don't get me wrong, there's vintage cars that are great and people have fun with them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the average person. You want the newer, hybrid, amazing, right? Our children come here to teach us. They're the answer to our prayer. And we mold them into our stupid, here's the old, I want you to be an old car. I want you to run like this old car. I want you to do this old thing. I want you to, and they're not realizing that what is within a child, God placed there to unfold. It cannot unfold unless you let it. And so giving a child freedom, listening. I have all of my moms that I work with on my charity. I have them sitting at the feet of their kids and listening closely, because they have to be able to recognize and help nurture their gifts so that the world can become a better place.
All right, so this is at this point in the video, we're talking, and it's pretty cordial and stuff like that. I'm imagining it's probably going to be about 15, 20 minutes in where things start to become contentious. And I don't exactly remember what keywords to do it, but the point of this video, so Rollo Tomasi was initially speaking with Jedediah Bia, I think is her name. And she was speaking to him, and they were going back and forth, and he kind of determined to himself that he kind of reached diminishing returns and that the conversation wasn't going anywhere. So kind of a similar situation. There's a woman here that I'm speaking to, and I'm trying to see when it happened, why it happened, stuff like that, just analyzing it just for fun. I don't want to go really over 20 minutes, 30 minutes here. I just want to do this and then be done with it. But maybe this video can just be an example for people who, guys in particular, who do with live streams with women on contentious or potentially controversial conversations, topic points, stuff like that. In my opinion, when you get in conversations with some people, they make you the enemy. They make you out to be the enemy because you're saying something they don't agree with, and they don't really fight against your viewpoints. They end up not liking you as a person. I don't know if this is what happened, but I'm going to let it play. I'm going to come back and review and probably be done by like 20 minutes or the 25-minute mark.
Place.
Yeah.
I think we come up closer to God than we are.
I think I kind of want to agree with you with your point that you were saying about supporting children, especially the mothers, kind of pouring that nurturing into children. There's a lot of that isn't really around nowadays, that kind of feminine nurturing spirit, which for children is especially men like the little boys, that I think that's extremely important, because a lot of the men who end up, fighting in wars and doing very dangerous things and harrowing things, I'd imagine that a lot of them think very fondly of their mothers or their aunts or their sisters during those really terrible moments. And even with daughters, a lot of things that happen in life that are very difficult to deal with, the mothers, and I'm specifically saying the mothers, kind of have a very important impact. Sorry, I got to get my dog and make sure he's not attacking.
No worries. I'll keep talking too. That was one of the things that I absolutely loved about both my interviews with Hotep Jesus and Barrington Martin, because Barrington talks about not only just his parents being an influence on him, but his grandparents and his grandmothers in particular. And he talks about how he still talks to his grandmothers, that his grandmothers, each one of them he talks to at least once a week. And that's huge. And then Hotep Jesus was telling me that his parents he had amazing parents, both. So when you have that nurturing, you just get more tools.
Yeah. A lot of kind of straight into the topic that I propose. A lot of men are criticized for not showing emotion. And the lack of emotional depth in men is something that a lot of, I would say, mothers kind of nurture
that aspect of a lot of males' development earlier on.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. My son's going to be best man in one of his friends' weddings, and he was practicing his speech, and you can tell the influence of even his mother on him, which ended up being a funny situation for Dane, because his friend was so nurturing when he split his head open when he was younger. And so he was going to tell a story about how all of his other friends were like, oh, well, call somebody, and he was like, are you kidding me? Give me your car. I got to take him to the, and he's just got this very nurturing, loving, attitude, because that's what his mom was. His mom was a nurse, and so we do hand down those spirits.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I kind of wanted to get to more of the darker aspects of things.
Yeah, that's cool.
Kind of highlight it. So on the same topic, a lot of males, there's a lot of, so with the emotion, I've noticed that a lot of females crave male emotional expression, but then there's certain factors that kind of make it difficult for a man to express his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
One of those things that I've found is that I don't know if a lot of guys have experienced this, but I think many men have experienced that whenever they show certain depths of emotion, a lot of women can't handle it. Like it'll freak them out, and in many cases the woman will either lose all attraction to the guy all at once, and then the guy kind of learns, okay, that's not a good thing to do. Can't show that much of that energy to it, at least that particular kind of woman. Because I've thought about this a lot of times, and I haven't really developed the full answer, but I was thinking, is it that some of the women don't have fathers in their lives? Because I mean, with fathers, you're gonna see the young girls. I'd imagine they're gonna see their fathers when they're at a low point, when they're expressing that side of themselves. And I think a lot of women, especially in the West, either are absent from their fathers or are fractured from that relationship in some way. And I think that makes it difficult for men in my generation.
Yeah, that would for sure. What I'm going to say sounds hopeless, but it's not. It can change. I changed myself in 8 weeks. The average person does not know what love is. And they have a thing called codependency, and they have attachment problems, and they have reciprocal issues. Like, it has to be reciprocal, and it has to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is, I think we're all realizing, anyone that's interested in relationships, unless they're really strong in their own power and authority, and they happen to find somebody who's also very sovereign, they're going to enter into conditional love. And conditional love is a broken model, because there's nobody that could ever hit all the conditions. And so no matter how many you hit, that person will go, boom, you didn't hit that one. So then you try and you do better in that one, and then you get it, and then boom, they're mad at the next thing. So what's going to happen is, whoever is demanding the conditions, mm-hmm. that person is going to get elevated worse and worse each time. So they're basically moving the envelope so that the finish line can never be achieved on a broken model. You see what I'm saying? And
there's
so
a lot of that going around right now, because you have different standards for the sexes. I've noticed. I mean, with men, it's okay. How much socioeconomic status do you have? Like how great are you in your stature physically? Like, are you taller than me?
Yeah.
You know, kind of. And then the men have standards on women, like, okay, how physically attractive are you? How feminine are you? How this, how that? I think a lot of, here's the thing. I don't necessarily disagree with the preference. I think the preference has to be reasonable. You know, like like it's okay to say, well, she has to, you know, he has to draw air. You know, he has to breathe in air and breathe it out. So he has to be alive. Women, I've noticed they tend to like guys, just the average woman. I've noticed they tend to be like physically attracted to guys that are taller than them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one metric, but that I wouldn't say that that's insane. Where it gets insane is where you ask the average woman who's like 5'2", and she says the guy I'm attracted to has to be at least 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's like, what? It's
Yeah.
like 14% of the population.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm here's what my goal always, and with all my clients, is to get them to, like Christ, overcome the world. So, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that all of those fleshly conditions at some level of connection to truth go away. How do I know this? Because I've seen a man with no arms and no legs have the most beautiful wife anyone could imagine, and children, and it's mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
He's not tall. He can't pick you up. He can't carry you. He can't cook for you. He can't, you know, and you could go on and on. He is a spiritual dynamo. And so people underestimate where their true power is. Their true power is doing things from a state of flowing with the creator. And people call it flow state, people call it the zone. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's a feeling. It is not a doing. And so once we get enough people to be sovereign and have overcome the world, which means you've overcome conditions. Somebody can come to me with bad news, and I might talk about it, or I might be like, wow, I can't believe that person did that. But I don't assume it's bad. See, what God does is he gives you the elevator, and everybody's trying to fight for the stairs, right? And so if I can stay in the zone, I can stay in my peace and truth and be connected, then my world will begin to match that. And so we can debate all the fleshly things. We could talk about it, and I could say, I agree with you, you know, a woman, you know, that's 5'2" should be more open-minded, you know, whatever. But when it really comes down to it, all of those things will lead to that same broken model of there has to be conditions in order for me to be happy. And so once you can get somebody to the point where they can be happy no matter what, then they can start going, oh, it was so fun. I met the coolest guy. Like, everything he said was so interesting. That's where you begin attracting beyond the world, overcoming the world. And it really does work. I mean, have you ever seen just a guy that's just really funny? He's not good looking. He's not tall. He doesn't have, you know, his outfit put together. He's not put together, but he's hilarious, and women love him. What does he have? In France, they say he has je ne sais quoi. It is that I don't know what it is, right? It's that thing, and we all can have that. But I do believe that the reason people have to have conditions is because they don't know who they are and they don't love themselves. If you do not love you, it makes it really difficult to love someone else. And so people need to start with themselves, do the work on the inside, and then have God bring you somebody, or, you know, the universe or whatever. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian for these things to work. These are universal laws.
Mm-hmm. I think I mean, I've heard similar lines of thought before. I think that that particular way of thinking, it sounds like the word that came up to me was enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are many things that have been placed into the current matrix that we're in that have kind of taken us more into that survivor frequency, where we're just kind of worried about surviving in general, and our lower animalistic instincts have kind of, on both sides, for males and females, have kind of been at that level for a very long time. Now, what that would look like at the highest vibration, I'd imagine it's something like what you said.
Yes. And it's true across the board, for abundance, for health, for everything. We have only begun to learn about this. And that's why I'm trying to work with mothers and their children now, because I would like to see the next generation not have to fit a template or try to squeeze into a matrix, but instead create from outside of it without boundaries, and to see where they can go. I mean, imagine a kid that really knew who they were. And I'm talking about, you know, I'll use your word, I'm talking about enlightened to the level that they understand the importance of humility. Because a lot of times, if you can have all the enlightenment in the world, but if you're still a narcissist, you're wielding a dangerous weapon. Or you can have all of the work you've done in the world, but you still can't control your tongue. You still have, you know, work to do.
I've noticed that people, so I'll kind of go over a story and kind of paint the point. I've noticed that so there was a lady, there was a girl my age. We were at a university. I went up to her and I was hitting on her, right? And I was like, "Hey, you're really attractive. What's your name? We should go out sometime." And she was like, "No, I don't want to, but you're very handsome and you're very nice and this and that, and you're very brave for coming up and talking to me."
Yeah, that is. I like it.
Generally speaking, whenever I did go out and talk to women and try to date them, it was I always had this. So there's a couple of things. I think the last 5-10 minutes of this, where she was saying, it's woo-woo magic, or it's we got to get to the best point of ourselves and stuff like that. And there are guys without limbs who are loved and stuff like that. Look, I mean, at a deeper esoteric level, I can understand it. So you're loving someone at a soul level. But to say that you're in a matrix just because you're operating as a male with male energy and a woman is operating as a female with female energy, that's kind of ridiculous. And I think that's the point in the conversation where we kind of like disagree with each other, which isn't bad. But I was kind of like listening, with what she was saying. A lot of the stuff I actually agreed with, but where she was saying, I'm going to teach kids to operate outside of the matrix. Well, the boy is still a boy. He's still going to function as a boy. He's going to have, male genitalia. So he's going to have predominantly male energy, flowing through his body. So like, he's going to be a lot different than the female, who's going to be primarily yin in her energy. So it's going to be different, right? That's my main point of contention. It seems like she was just being contrary just to be contrary. Like she just wanted to be contrary with what I was saying. But I also think that the topic that I brought up was too contentious to have with her, because she was just kind of set in her ways. She didn't really, ironically, she didn't really want to listen to my perspective, which I was just sharing my perspective. And I don't think I was brave enough to just come out and say what I was thinking, which, listening to it now, I was being very measured with my words. It felt like there was a lot of tension going on as well. I'm going to play the rest. I'm going to stop it when I think we're at our max. I don't think I'm at the point of diminishing returns, but I think there is an underlying tension in the conversation. You can kind of see, I don't know. She doesn't like the conversation, but I also don't like the conversation, honestly. Well, I wanted to like it, but it seems like it. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'll play the rest.
This thing in the back of my head, the meme where the guy's like, "Brace yourself," because like a lot of women, I don't know. Sometimes you either get like a, "Oh no, thank you," like, and then it's like, "Oh my god, okay, fine," but then you'll get the, "Oh no, oh my god, I can't believe you just asked me out. That's awful," or you get like the daggers, with the eyes, or you'll get, I don't know. Sometimes you'll get emasculated. Sometimes you'll get ignored. Like they'll pretend you weren't there and you didn't just say something and keep walking on. Mm-hmm. But this particular woman kind of captured my imagination and had my full attention, because I noticed that she did less than she had to in that situation. Mm-hmm. It compelled me to actually sit and talk to her. And we had a conversation about sandwiches. Like, it was like simple things, right? Were enjoyable. Like, but this was after getting rejected. So the rejection actually ended up feeling completely fine.
Right.
It was because of her energy. It was more feminine, but at the same time, like, it was like I had never really experienced something like that. So it was kind of like, wow, what's happening?
That's awesome. And that's a rejection. Imagine the other way.
Yeah, but then what was interesting is that I had asked her, because I had never really experienced it. I was like, there's no way you could be like this unless you went through something. Yeah. And because like I was one of the guys who hit on basically any woman I thought was attractive enough. Like, I wouldn't say I was a player, but I was probably closest thing to it. So this particular woman, she said, "Yeah, my boyfriend, he actually ended his own life." And
that'll be sobering.
And I was like, wow. But she kind of moved me throughout that conversation so much that I ended up finding her after the conversation and giving her a hug. But what was cool from that was that there were a lot of men and women I noticed have bitter resentments towards the other side. And that would also include me at that time to a certain degree. And a lot of those resentments kind of faded into nothingness. I recognize that a lot of times it kind of faded away whenever an interaction between the opposite sex looked.
All right, so there's another thing. Earlier in the conversation, she was it seems like she already thought she knew where the conversation was going, and she was just kind of preempting everything. Like preemptively going, "Oh no, I know where you want to go, but I don't want to go there. I want to go here," which is weird. But so I'm just describing my experience and describing the energy and stuff like that, which is fine. We're kind of having we're talking about a lot of different things, not just one thing.
Looked something like that. And it was several times where it just kind of had this healing effect. That's kind of one of the solutions. I was kind of hinting at it, but that's kind of one of the solutions to the issue I presented in this.
Right, but you're also maturing. because you're recognizing it. That same feminine, high, enlightened, kind rejection might not have felt the same when you weren't as mature.
Yeah.
So you had to at least be able to be aware of that, you know, and that's part of your shift probably as well. Because we're always equally responsible for all of the things that we create. So anytime I have something bad happen, I used to look for the cause outside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now I look for the cause inside of myself.
Yeah, the external locus of control.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here. So I actually agree with what she was saying. On one of my videos, The Battle is Within or The War is Within, I talk about this, where a lot of the things that happen in the outside world are manifestations of what's going on internally. And we ultimately have the power to decide where we want to go in life and things like that. So when she's saying look inside, she's saying look to like the thoughts that you have inside of your mind, and are they mostly positive? Are they mostly negative? Are you creating? Are you creating the bad things that are happening? Things like that.
That's a major. I remember on YouTube I remember talking about something similar to that, and how a lot of movements that are out nowadays, they kind of they force people into an external locus of control, and it causes a lot of pain. Like the more louder ones, like feminism, and of course you have like other Marxist derivatives and stuff like that. It kind of forces people to blame other people for things that they have full control over
Or participation in. And to me, a bystander's no different than a bully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's and once you realize it, nothing really affects you at an emotional level, because you know how to process it. And that's the difference too, because when, let's say those people who are in a place where they're vulnerable to somebody, some Marxist or somebody taking the reins of their horse, they're not holding on to their reins, because they're handing the reins over and saying, here's the reins to my horse, and then I'm going to be miserable depending on where you're going to take me on this horse, right? Instead of taking back control and realizing how much of this is me, how much of this movement is me, how much of this hell is me. And once you take those the control, those reins back, you now have the power, right? You didn't have the power when you're giving it to the circumference.
So I'm gonna skip ahead and see if I can find something else. I don't think we're. It's really not bad. If we would have stopped at the 30 mark, if we would have stopped at the 30-minute mark, I think things would have pretty much ended up pretty decently.
The things on the external. When you're little and you don't know the tricks behind, a movie. Wow. You can't even get an erection unless there's something coming all the time. So when they're in the presence of a regular woman and they're not,
for that next high, that next experience, the next structure their lifestyle, it tends to kind of seep in.
and that's why you have to decide what kind of energy you want.
That's okay. You're teaching me things. One of the things that males, I've noticed, one of our vices that tends to be differentiated from the female vice And the reason I differentiate these um, things is to understand how systems work.
Mhm.
So I've noticed males tend to have vices with pornography. Tends to be a big issue with males because of a lot of things. Because it's so prolific, because it's so readily accessible, because of how the average male, the average millennial as well, how they structure their lifestyle. Um, it tends to kind of seep in and create a lot of issues. Um, I would say the female equivalent to that would probably be social media, so like TikTok and Facebook, things like that. Because you end up just like the male is chasing for that next high, that next experience, the next sexual experience. The female, um, at least the younger ones, I don't necessarily know.
So I think I committed a mortal sin on this one. So you notice I kind of call out the female and the male vices specifically. I think that this was probably a sour point with her, but I'm not sure. Uh, yeah, see where it goes.
Know that know the effects it's having on older females, but I would say the younger females seem to be chasing validation, and that validation, like the sexual escapades, has no end.
No, exactly.
And I
And
think
it,
that's why it's so powerful.
yeah, and it is evil. It's not good validation. It's evil validation. And it will have you cutting yourself and poking yourself and starving yourself
Yeah,
and doing all kinds of things that aren't healthy. Um, One of the things that I do a lot on my channel is I work with women out of sex trafficking, and I work with women out of satanic ritual abuse. And of course, recently had Madison Marquette on, who was in the porn industry for many years against her own will. And so I have gotten a really good education on porn. And one of the things that I think is unfortunate is that, one, guys don't know how they're destroying their own sex lives from doing it.
Okay, so this is the one thing. So the stuff she was talking about here, where she met like an insider, and how guys watching porn is like destroying their lives and stuff. I don't think she understands that most guys don't really have a sex life to be destroyed. So when they're watching porn, they're watching it as a means of coping with the fact that they don't have one. And I mean, it's not necessarily a good thing that they're doing that. But the fact that they're using it as a primary source of like what they consider, affection and stuff like that, it's not good. But I don't think she understands just the male, the fact that males are very lonely. They live lonely lives. They pretty much are starved of affection in most cases. But then you have you do have a percentage of men who like they don't have any issues with that. And they get women all the time and stuff like that. But I think that was our point of disagreement on this particular part of.
It.
Yeah.
Because what happens is they get a thing that I have coined the name click dick, because it literally is, they have to click, 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 click. Like they can't even get an erection unless there's something coming all the time. So when they're in the presence of a regular woman and they're not connecting on a heart level, they're trying to get that fleshly click, and it's just not working. Yeah. And so that's the first part, is how really unhealthy it is for them. But then there's the side of, any guy that I've ever talked to that participates in strip clubs and stuff like that, I always ask them, I go, do you think that these young women really want to be doing that? Oh yeah, they do. They make so much more money, and they have babies. They got to take care of them. So I'm doing a good thing. Well, that's their justification, because actually that isn't true. Most of those women don't want to be there, and the ones that are
So this is another thing. So we're kind of framing these women as victims, or she's framing the women as victims, but then she's framing the men as like taking advantage of the victims, which is interesting. It seems like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong with this, but and I don't think we've reached the point of diminishing returns yet, at this particular point, because there's points that I agree on with her, and I think she knew that, and there are points that I disagreed on. But the whole women in that industry being victims thing, Sterling Cooper came out and said that a lot of the women who do prawn, they actually enjoy it, on some level. So them saying that they, or her saying that they don't like doing it, something like that. I mean, maybe there's pockets of women that don't like doing it, but otherwise you'd have to justify it, because this is like an award-winning prawn star coming out and saying that they enjoy doing the work, doing prawn. I think there's a couple of things she said I want to talk about. We can go back to 40.
Get that fleshly click, and it's just not working. Yeah. And
so
that's the first part is how really unhealthy it is for them. But then there's the side of, you know, any guy that I've ever talked to that participates in strip clubs and stuff like that, I always ask them, I go, do you think that these young women really want to be doing that? Oh yeah, they do. They make so much more money, and you know, they have babies, you got to take care of them. So I'm doing a good thing. Well, that's their justification, because actually that isn't true. Most of those women don't want to be there, and the ones that are there that say that they want to be there have been so traumatized and so damaged in their life that they're...
All right, so I remember what I was going to say now. What she's saying, I think, is right. There are some women who are in the prawn industry, the adult industry, and they've been traumatized before they got there and even after they got there. Bad situations growing up, and then just situations on set, because some of the scenes they shoot are very extreme and they traumatize the women. But I guess my thing is, like, we don't really explore it from the male end. Males, it seems like traumatized individuals are just in this situation regardless. Like, you have males aren't traumatized in this situation. Their thing is, like, they're lonely. They don't really have, like, most men, if they had a chance to get, you know, to interact with a woman, you know, at least intimately, versus just watching prawn, I would argue that they would go after a physical interaction. But getting an interaction with a woman, and even getting to the point of marriage and committed relationship or something like that, is becoming more and more difficult, where watching prawn is becoming more and more easy. So that kind of situation is what's causing creating the gap. So that's what's causing the issue. She wants men to be more cognizant of the women in the industry, but we're not really showing any empathy for the men who are consuming this media.
They're often there under the guise of being somebody's girlfriend, when really they're kind of being pimped out. And then, not to mention the fact that, from what Madison was saying, if you see a woman that's in a porn that is inappropriately laughing, or not inappropriately, but the timing is off, or she seems like she's dazed, yes, she probably is against her will. So you're participating as a bystander with somebody that's more foul than a bully. And so that's the other thing. I mean, I think we have to start being accountable, but that means that we each have to look at ourselves. But guess what? Just like anything, that energy is going to expand, and at some point it will put you on your knees, and you will have to make a choice on what kind of life you really want to have.
Yeah, so I've experienced it personally.
Yeah.
A lot of the things you're saying, I've experienced myself personally. Yeah. I've experienced the impotence. I've experienced a lot of those things. Yeah. And I've experienced the constant need for expansion. So, like, it's affecting more men than anyone can imagine.
Yeah.
it's affecting good men. It's affecting
Yeah,
bad men. It's
that's right.
affecting every type of man. It's affecting the righteous man. It's affecting the man who's not so righteous. It's affecting the one who fights the dark side. It's affecting the one who doesn't fight.
Doesn't fight it,
Yeah.
embraces it.
So, I would say also there's a lot of traumas on both sides of the sexes that are kind of being traumas and needs are kind of being put on a string and used against the sexes and have been for quite a long time. The porn industry, I think, kind of put it into overdrive because now we have millennials who aren't getting married. They're not seeking to have a sacred union. They're not seeking to have a union with one person long term. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Like there's a lot of reasons on
All right, so I think this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I'm getting to the meat of I'm getting to the meat of it. So I think this is what's going to mess everything up.
with the economy, with the behaviors of both sides, and the incentives, the different incentives to get married long term. That is influencing how both sides are behaving. Now,
Right.
you said trauma in particular leads to the stripping. I think one of the things that leads to um, males using pornography partly is the difficulty of access to sex. Now, the best way, I guess the most righteous way you could interpret that is okay, he is not able to get married with the person that he wants, or he's not, like, somehow there's a break in that. Um, now, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that he's not at fault for that, but there's a lot of that case, in particular, long term, that is influencing how both sides are behaving. Now,
Right.
you said trauma in particular leads to the stripping. I think one of the things that leads to um, males using pornography partly is the difficulty of access to sex. Now, the best way, I guess the most righteous way you could interpret that is okay, he is not able to get married with the person that he wants, or he's not, like, somehow there's a break in that. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that he's not at fault for that, but there's a lot of factors that are being controlled that are kind of allowing these industries to thrive off of trauma and because males need sex. Like most people would say, no, they don't. But it's extremely important for males. I mean, they have like 8 to 15 times more testosterone than the average woman. So, I mean, that particular thing itself.
All right, so I think this was kind of the I kind of get this oh, he's a misogynist tone from her. Maybe I could be wrong. I don't know. There were a lot of things happening in this conversation just at a deeper level that I can only glimpse at right now, but I'm going back to this conversation because it kind of taught me a lot. All right, let me keep playing.
Like, that energy has to go somewhere. I mean, it's going to go towards, I mean, here's the things where it's going to go towards. It's going to go towards working. It's going to go towards making a better life for himself, being competitive, things like that. It's going to go towards things that could be good. But then the other aspect of it is he's going to want to have sex with something, and namely a female. I mean, he could have sex with a fleshlight, but namely he's likely gonna want to have sex with.
She probably didn't like that joke. I think she's also like a very religious or at least spiritual woman, and so as it pertains to like Christianity and stuff like that. I could be wrong, but like some of the stuff I was saying, I just don't think she really liked. Like, she's like inside, she was thinking like, "Wow, this guy's opinion is awful." All right. Anyways,
A significant other and someone who he wants to be intimate with.
Right.
Granted, we've kind of made it a little more cheap in the modern day.
Totally.
But there's a lot of factors that have caused that, and I kind of want to get into it, but I want to hear what you have to say about that first.
About which part? The energy being channeled?
I don't know. I said a lot.
Yeah.
I do this. You kind of go off of kind of just impromptu. I do the same thing as well.
Yeah.
I think our styles are very similar.
Yeah. And so the thing that popped out to me the most was just the channeling of sexual energy, because this is, there's a book called not the Science of Getting Rich, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And one of the chapters is all about transmutation of sexual energy and how some of the most successful men in the world had a muse, or, some woman that really inspired them, and made them drive to be all that they can be. And so if you can go to your computer and click, you just wasted all of your energy, your creative energy. Not to mention, we could get into a whole nother subject of people who have begun not only doing that, but preserving the minerals that are in men's fluids. Because what happens is there's actually ways to have an orgasm without an ejaculation. And there's a lot of younger men that are learning about it and understanding it. And these very things are going to probably keep them from aging as much. And so for guys to begin understanding that the way God made us, and you can't, the devil tries to imitate everything God does. And so if you come and recognize
Hey, kitty.
the sickness, this is Thor.
and if I stopped it there, the conversation would have been fine if I stopped it like right there, honestly.
Yeah, we name all of our cats and dogs after superheroes.
I don't think guys like talking about those kind of things, because I'm working on those things myself.
Yeah.
And I recognize that energy, that fluid, it's extremely powerful. But then it does cause you to age. And it's funny because I feel like I was the kind of person who read the manuscript, and once I read.
So you had heard of this before? You've heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard about it before.
Okay.
I learned a
lot of
later.
guys haven't.
I learned a little later, and I was like, "What? I've been slowly aging myself. Like, what? My body has to, like, it basically cuts off a lot of functions just to create how many hundreds of million? Really? So I create little life in me? That's
I actually believe that that's the true definition of fornication. Like, I think it's messing around, even if you are married, and not using it properly. Yeah.
Damn, you can have a lot of guys.
Really.
How?
I don't know what was going on with that part of the conversation, but the energy was getting weird. Anyways, I think this is about where I'm gonna click it off. I'm surprised there's no. I don't know where. I don't know. I'm gonna skip ahead and see if I can find exactly where it got to the point where it was like, oh,
Yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
about it before.
okay.
It's slowly aging out of function. Really?
That's the truth. Sound. Even if you are married.
Man, you can have a lot of guys.
Well, and
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? That's the thing that I think is so beautiful about free will is we get to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
You know, and we have no one to blame but ourselves. I mean, we could try, and that gets back to all the reasons why we're so divided. Because let me tell you, the more enlightened you become, the more you realize that your life affects everyone's. And I don't just mean one family or one neighborhood. I mean everyone, the true butterfly effect. Working with me for a long time, who have even gotten to the levels of where I would really start working with them on unity and embracing people as spiritual entities rather than as separate things like, you know, Marxist, Republican, white, black, religion differences, whatever it is. There's what that is separation of, it allows for the very opposite of what will bring us true happiness, because actually some of the happiest people in the world are the givers and the contributors. I mean, at one point in time, the gentleman that started Salvation Army, the reason he was so successful in the beginning was because he talked all the homeless people into helping other people. Well, once they realized that they were in a place of helping other people, they got their power back. And it changed who they were. And so they began using new energy that had to expand. And next thing you know, they're off the streets. And so, you know, that's what happened. It's kind of like you starting your channel. It starts out small, but eventually it won't be small anymore.
That sounds really cool. Sounds good. Sounds good to me. I think there's some notable YouTubers who kind of exemplify what you're saying. Mr. Beast, very, you know, I don't see any bad intentions, but very giving. You have several different channels where they just go out and give and give and give and give and give. And he's, of course, you can kind of see with his channel, it's grown it's very large. I think where guys will be when pornography isn't so prolific, where that energy will go will look extremely good. Like it'll look extremely good for the rest of the world because
it'll be powerful.
Yeah.
It will be what God intended them to be. And here's the thing is I believe that we haven't even begun to tap into what we can do as humans.
No.
Especially because the last thing a human does is unite with other humans. They're too busy looking at how different they are, not realizing that it is the.
all right. So there's a couple of things that are going on here that I noticed. So we're disagreeing with each other, but we're doing it in code. It's really interesting. So we're not really having a conversation. We're just sending messages past each other, almost like low-key digging at each other. She seems to be, and I don't know if she's being like sincere or not, but it seems to be like kind of a dig, right? Because she's thinking, oh, this guy, he claims to believe all this spiritual enlightenment stuff and esotericism, but he still looks at the differences that people have. So maybe she seems like, oh, this guy, he's a simpleton. The way he thinks is very simple, very low vibration, low frequency, is kind of what I'm getting.
The very diversity that God put there for a reason. there's one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen called Biggest Little Farm. And the whole thing is set upon diversity and how if you have the proper amount of diversity, you have an ecosystem that is flawless.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have pestilence, you don't have coyotes attacking, you don't have any of that stuff because the circle of life is handling itself.
I think that
a couple of things. She brings the diversity aspect into the conversation, which is good, but she neglects the actual order of nature and how certain things have to be at certain levels in order for things to work. The idea that the standards of how everyone lives within a natural environment is determined by the predators within that environment, just from a nature standpoint. But that's just purely primal. But then there's some other stuff. But I don't know.
I think that's really beautiful because with a lot of the issues between men and women seem to stem from not understanding the vast differences between men and women.
Yeah.
Which you would think that the vast differences would divide the two sexes, but I think it ends up polarizing the two sexes the most just based off of the differences.
Right.
I'm pretty much agreeing with what she's saying here, but in my own way, because like I'm trying to keep the conversation on focus on a particular topic that we're talking about, which is why I specifically am talking about relationships and dating and men and women.
It is interesting. And what I would say about that is you get to a level of reading energy that it is beyond sex.
So I didn't even have to stop. Basically, the same thing happened again. So I was saying, look, like it's kind of a tug of war. It seems like we're kind of our tug of war is on accepting things or not accepting. She doesn't want to admit or agree to things. She just kind of wants to throw her own ideas out, which is perfectly fine. But I mean, that's kind of the energy. That's kind of what I was getting from the very beginning all the way up through the middle. And this is like the latter third of the video.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that's part of the reason why there's all these people coming out with 100 different ways of saying what kind of sex they are. Because
so I like the free thinking that she has here. Only issue is a lot of that stuff that people are thinking and stuff like that with like the 100 million different sexes and stuff like that. Some of that, like a lot of that is pathological. And some of it you can probably go into some esotericism, but yeah, don't really have too much on.
I don't think that's right.
you know, because really we are just light beings in human suits, right? And when you start working with people based on their energy rather than on what they look like, you get different results. Because
Okay, this is where I kind of think I don't think she's nuts, but I think she's just being contrary just to be contrary, because male energy is different from female energy. And if you're dealing with, even if you are dealing with a light being, if you're dealing with a male versus a female, they're going to express energy differently. They're not going to have the same energetic signature. Men are going to be electric, whereas women are going to be magnetic. the energy is going to look different. It's going to feel different when you're around a woman versus when you're around a man. That's again, that's suggesting that there's differences and stuff like that, which I think she was just trying to be contrary, just to be contrary, and she just didn't want to say that. She didn't want to either admit things that are a certain way, or she's just exploring different things. She's just exploring what I'm saying in a different way to just kind of make the conversation as interesting as possible. I actually don't know. I know that's typically how a lot of women communicate. They explore in a very novel way, which is good. It's not bad.
Because see, you can't fake good energy.
Yeah.
You can't, because the law of correspondence is always at work. And so that tells you, it's kind of, I call it the Sherlock Holmes law, where you can watch somebody or listen to every word they say, and you can learn a lot about them in a very short period of time. It makes it difficult for me to date because my standards are so high that I recognize very quickly that somebody hasn't grown past attachments or hasn't grown past narcissism or hasn't grown, and I don't mean narcissistic.
So this may or may not be an attack on me. I actually don't know where this is going because, I mean, she's saying she has high standards because she can sense the energy and stuff like that, and she can sense when the person, is attachments. By attachments, I'm assuming she means like, oh, he thinks that females do this and males do this, so he's kind of like set in his ways, kind of thing. I was expecting there to be a plank, but I don't really think there is one. Interestingly enough. When I say plank, I mean I was expecting there to be like a point in the conversation where it just was going to go to hell.
Like something that was a legitimate, therapeutic.
You're talking about like a serious problem.
I'm talking about somebody. Well, I'm talking about somebody that just has those tendencies, but not a full-out narcissist. But people have to begin overcoming themselves. As long as you're aggravated with anything outside, you've got work to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's beautiful, and like another example of amazing things that happen with diversity is there's this place in Hawaii, and it's called Pharmacy, but it's farm, like down on the farm with the cows and the chickens, so it's Pharmacy. And they are a huge herbal garden, and they provide all kinds of stuff. And somebody was visiting it, and they were on YouTube, and they were saying, wow, like I have this too, but I get this type of bug. And they're like, oh, well, that's impossible for us to do because we have so many different kinds of herbs that the bugs, certain bugs don't like one of them. And so the bugs stay away completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is what we're missing in life, is appreciating the differences. Intellectual people only hang out with intellectuals, and jocks only hang out with jocks, and gamers only hang out with gamers. But
in high school, I hung out with the jocks. I hung out with the intellectuals. I hung out with anyone who would accept me.
Yeah, but that's why you probably can jump around in a lot of different areas because of that. But I think it's really good. And whenever I did a project, I always tried to hire people who were handicapped, people who were old, people who I really liked to cover it all. I mean, I had the most amazing assistant who had cerebral palsy. We have since lost her, but I just had her stay at the house. I let her, stay in our guest room, and she was so cute. The only thing she couldn't do is before she got there, she's like, do you have stairs? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, are you okay with me bumping down the stairs on my butt? And I'm like, sure. Because she just couldn't do it. But she was amazing. That girl would stay on the phone where most people would get up and move around and do stuff. And so it was actually an advantage that she had that difference.
Mm-hmm. We're coming at the hour mark.
Yeah,
I
thank
just
you.
want to make sure that our schedules are working good. So I was thinking in the next 30, 45 minutes, we could call it quits. Are you good with that?
Yeah, I actually have about 15 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I wanted to make sure I covered some of what's going on in the outer stretches of things.
Okay.
But I'm not in I'm not in the highest form of what I am, technically.
Amazing relationship. And there's lots of things that we can do to help that. But one of the first things I'll do is I'll say, hey, why don't you write up a list of all of the things that you would like?
Now I'm just kind of scrubbing through the video just to see what was going on. There's a lot of things that were unmet with this stuff.
And then take the list and put it in so she named them and I wrote them down and I was like, those were all things that were in your top 2 and you don't have any of those. So you went out with a guy expecting him to fulfill your needs when you already in your head knew those are the top 2 important things. Why would you keep dating him? And so that's what happens is people don't know themselves. And the reason they don't know themselves is because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. And I know that it sounds like I'm repeating the same thing over and over again. But if you do not love yourself, you cannot know how you want someone else to love you. And that includes taking care of yourself. And that includes understanding what your own needs are. Understanding it was cute. She was so cute. Everything she did was cute. Well, that's really wonderful, but she's not a partner and you want a partner. You don't want a doll, you know? And so you have to know what kind of person it is that you want.
Now,
she has a nanny. She doesn't do anything to contribute to society. And she's telling you what to do. Who's the alpha?
Oh, shit.
And absolutely an alpha male. And I'll say to him, oh, your wife's the alpha. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? No. Well, this girl runs you into the ground. She does no work. She has a nanny. She doesn't do anything to contribute to society. And she's telling you what to do. Who's the alpha?
Oh, shit.
And so it's kind of interesting because they sneak up on you. They look like cute little princesses, but they're actually takers, and they haven't developed because they grew up in families that probably enabled them and treated them and did everything for them, so they don't know how to do anything.
My mentor would say that those kind of women, he calls them the Diana complex. Partly, it's a slightly different. So those are the kind. Really, he calls them the Diana complex. Partly, it's a slightly different. So those are the kind of women I would say that would drain a guy and would end up, emasculating him, which that gets in the way worse stuff. But in a way, feminism that had a lot that created a lot of that, and a lot of women nowadays, that particular movement kind of created that less cooperative, more competitive energy.
Yes.
which I don't think the sexes were designed to compete with each other.
I don't either.
And everything about us energetically and everything about us in our makeup would suggest that we were designed to thrive with each other.
Yes.
Movements like the feminist movement, like if you go back and look at some of the people who were heading up those movements, Kate Millett, for example, and her sister now, who's kind of making up for a lost time and touring the country and saying, yeah, my sister was actually crazy. So, those women and gender studies things that you guys have in college, all that was designed to destroy the family. It was designed to make women hate men. It was designed, like, the entire movement seems to be wrapped around the idea of female superiority to men. Looking back, looking back on some of this stuff, I'm surprised we kind of agree with each other. It's interesting. But then it uses that as a way of like, it kind of like, it's weird because it like goes under the guise of equality, which is another thing. But
yeah, I mean, they're all lovely words, and I think that gets back to that Satan's trick, that devil's trick, that it's always the knockoff. It's never what really will work. So we're going to break up the family and we're going to destroy what the family can do, but we'll have gangs. We'll have gangs that you can be a part of, and we'll kick ass. And so I believe that God is not competitive. I believe that God is creative. And I think that God wants us to be creators and not competitive. Like, it doesn't mean you don't like see something and want to go up and doing drugs or, whatever.
They kind of use our communities. I mean, with our particular men and our, the incarceration of Black men during the 60s, I guess, on through the 90s. The gangs that were established as well with the Bloods and Crips, which has their roots in a lot of the higher power, the higher families that are kind of wreaking havoc right now. We were kind of the beta test for roots and a lot of the higher power. So one thing I would say is we're both kind of intimately aware with the deeper aspects of things, the red pill and stuff like that. And so even though I'm criticizing and looking at a bunch of things critically and analyzing things with this video, I do have respect for the fact that she's at least gone out there and speaking about what she believes and things like that. Power, the higher families that are kind of wreaking havoc right now. We were kind of the beta test for what's currently happening in the United States. And just watching it, as a young millennial and watching and realizing that we were the beta test, that's where I was kind of like, wow, guys, don't go in that direction. It's really bad.
Not a good one. Not a good one.
Yeah, because the men aren't happy and the women aren't happy in our particular community, and we're still picking up the pieces for a lot of that stuff that's going on.
There's so many that are looking for answers, though, and I do have faith in humanity, unlike most people. I have seen, I don't know if you're aware, but I used to have a charity where I was working with guys out of jail.
Yeah.
And it was youth prison.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I know
it was so fun. I learned so much. Oh my gosh. I really understand so much more. And so I can look at things and understand it, because I think this is where we're missing. If we don't understand, it can be hard to grace, but give them a second chance. And I was like, I mean, these guys didn't even have a first chance. They didn't have dads. They didn't have moms. There was,
and extremely important for guys to have a dad, because that masculine model, if he doesn't have that, basically he's going to grow up extremely chaotic. He's not going to know how to be a man. Like, I've noticed a lot of truthers, they complain. They're like, come on, guys, man up, be strong. But it's like a lot of
we don't know what that is, right?
A lot of those guys, I mean, you have the dark ones, they
basically had full spectrum dominance over the sexes, you know, putting stuff in foods, breaking up
Water,
families.
air, yeah.
Yeah, like single motherhood, like that system itself, like that basically puts masculinity at heel, like in the younger boys. And it's extremely, now you do have moms, I will give
Yeah.
credit to the single moms who know that
Yeah.
certain things have to be, and they'll actually take their sons and they'll go give them to male mentors.
Right.
Now I think that those particular children who end up having that have an edge over the children who are just raised by mothers, because you know I love my mother to death, but I'm witness that when guys are raised by mothers, like it's a very delicate process, and it's also, it can also be very emasculating, even if the mother's not trying to be emasculating.
Absolutely.
Even if she's a good mom.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And that's what happened to one of the guys that I work with. There was 4.
Looking back at some of this stuff, I'm surprised we actually agree with each other. So I actually got to go. I'm going to cut this short. Yeah. So I expected this to be a little different. Looking back at it now, there's actually a lot we agreed on. There's some things we disagreed on. There was some mild contention energetically in the conversation. Some of the terms we used were also kind of, there is a lot of differences with that too. One thing I want to say, just as a general rule, whenever you're in discussions with women, you really aren't going to have a good discussion if you don't agree with each other. Because a lot of women, they can't disagree righteously. Their disagreements become an issue of you existing. And take that however you will, but when I said walk the plank, it was kind of just, you know, when you're starting a conversation with a woman, let's just say you're on a ship and you're both communicating and things like that. But then whenever you're speaking about something she disagrees with, then you're on a plank, right? And she's just waiting. And the more you explain about why you're saying the things you're saying, the further you're going off the plank. And it's not because she's better than you. It's not because she's better at debating or something like that. It's just simply because she disagrees, and that negative emotion causes her to think that you're the enemy. There's not really any deep thought put into the disagreement that she has with you. She just feels negative emotions. But this particular conversation, surprisingly, doesn't seem like, you know, like there was too much. Doesn't seem like there was too much that we actually disagreed on, looking back at it.
In particular, that I had hands-on, work with, and one of them was a Hispanic kid from Houston, and he had the greatest mom. She was amazing. Dad totally gone. If he showed up, he came to take stuff and leave. It was kind of a really bad situation. But the mom worked 3 jobs. So she was working so hard that she was never home. Even though when she was there, she was a great presence and she had high standards, but she couldn't monitor him. So he was off the radar. So yeah, it really, family is so important.
I've noticed the moms try to be strong for their boys, but then when they're trying to be strong, they tend to like not be emotionally available for them, and it causes issues. Like I can only say technically with my experience that was the case, that my mom was trying to be strong for me in light of how bad things were. Granted, we were all in that box, so it's like, damn, mama, you were fighting,
Yeah.
So if he came back after the war, it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, we just had like bombs, all kinds of crazy things, and we were screaming and shooting. Moms try to be tough, and they think that that's going to make the boy tough, but it just ends up doing the exact opposite, which is, to a lot of women, it's like, wow, really? It's like, yeah, because it's energy. You're in the masculine, so he kind of like takes on the opposite energy, because you're taking on the energy that his father would take on. It's really, It's
Well,
really
what's really good about it, though,
Oh man, I think I hit a nerve with that one. That was like that was like a killer blow right there in terms of a lot of issues. Kind of proves that single motherhood is kind of like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna stop this because I got some errands to run. But yeah, walk the plank.